In a quiet corner of her family home in Kumasi, Ghana, Dineo sat at the dinner table with her parents, siblings, and in-laws. She placed her phone face down, took a deep breath, and calmly said, "I was let go today. No job, no salary." For a moment, the room went still, but instead of comfort or support, what came next broke her heart. Her mother gave a sharp look and said, "We always knew your job wouldn't last." Her brother didn't ask how she was feeling. Instead, he asked if he could take back the generator he had lent her, saying she didn't need it anymore. Her sister-in-law started whispering to others about moving into Dineo's room since she was no longer working. The air was cold, but their fake smiles were colder. No one offered a hug. No one asked if she was okay. But Dineo just nodded, silent, watching and recording every word. What they didn't know was that this wasn't a cry for help. It was a test, a small, painful test, to see who loved her without money, without title, without power. And what she saw that night would change everything. Dineo sat at the table, still calm, still quiet. After sharing her news, she looked at each face around her, hoping, even just a little, that someone might ask if she was okay, if she needed anything, if she wanted a hug. But what came next wasn't love. It wasn't even surprise. It was cruelty, dressed up as honesty. Her mother was the first to speak, and the words cut deeper than any silence. "We told you that fancy job of yours wouldn't last. You thought you were better than us because you worked in an office." Dineo blinked but said nothing. She felt a sting in her chest, but she kept her face steady. Her brother didn't ask how she would manage or offer help. He leaned back in his chair and said casually, "So, about the generator I gave you, I think I should take it back. You won't be needing it anymore now, right?" He was smiling, almost like he had been waiting for this day. Her sister-in-law, who had once come to Dineo for help with school fees, leaned in toward her husband and whispered, not even low enough to hide it, "Maybe now we can finally move into her room. It's bigger, and she doesn't need it anymore." Dineo heard every word. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. Instead, she gently reached for her phone under the table and pressed record. If her family was going to show her who they truly were, she would remember it all. Every word, every tone, every fake smile. The conversation kept going. It turned into something like a business meeting. Her uncle said, "You should probably think about selling your car. Why keep it if you're not going to work?" Another cousin laughed and said, "Maybe we should help her sell her clothes too. She has enough to dress 3 people. The laughter echoed, but Dineo just nodded. No tears, just silence and eyes wide open. She realized something that day. Her job title, her salary, her ability to help. That was all they ever saw. Not her heart, not her kindness, not her late nights helping them with bills, school fees, rent, groceries. They didn't see her. They only saw what she could give. As they talked, her father finally spoke. But even he, the man who once carried her on his back as a little girl, didn't offer comfort. He looked her in the eyes and asked, "So, will you be going back to your ex now? He's the only one who might take care of you." Dineo wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. Her own father, hoping she'd crawl back to a man who hurt her, just because she had lost a job. Still, she stayed calm. She nodded, as if taking mental notes. She had no plans of fighting them, no plans of proving herself right. She had a plan, but it didn't involve arguments. It involved truth, and the truth was standing loud and clear in that room. No one had come to hug her. No one had come to say, "We'll figure it out together." They were calculating, not comforting, cold, not concerned. And that's when it hit her. She wasn't sitting with family. She was sitting with people who had been waiting to see her fall. People who only smiled when she was useful. People who wore masks of love but spoke with knives. The night ended with her walking away from the table, slowly, quietly, her phone still recording in her hand. She went to her room, shut the door gently, and sat on the edge of her bed. The words kept echoing in her head. "We told you it wouldn't last. Give back the generator. Sell her car. Move into her room." Each one like a brick on her chest. But under that weight, she was smiling. Not because she enjoyed the pain, but because now she knew. She knew exactly who they were, and more importantly, she knew who she was without the job, without the title, without the money. She had tested them, not because she wanted revenge, but because she needed clarity, and now she had it. What they didn't know, what none of them suspected, was that she wasn't jobless, not even for a second. She had already accepted a bigger offer from a global company, a job that would move her higher than she had ever been. But before she stepped into that new life, she wanted to step back, just for a moment, and see something. Who would love her when she had nothing to give? Who would see her, not her salary? Now she had her answer, and it broke her heart, yes, but it also gave her peace, because the truth, though painful, was clear. Her little test had shown her everything she needed to know, and when the time came, she would return to that same table, not with anger, not with pride, but with truth, and the truth would speak louder than any of their fake smiles ever could. The very next morning, Dineo was called into the living room for a so-called family meeting. It sounded serious, like something important had come up. For a moment, she thought maybe they had changed their minds. Maybe they were feeling sorry for how they treated her the night before. Maybe someone had realized they'd gone too far. But as soon as she sat down, she understood this meeting was not about love or support. It was a cold, selfish gathering. Her uncle began the conversation by clearing his throat and saying, "We should talk about what happens next. You're not working now, and things must be adjusted." Dineo raised her eyebrows, but stayed silent. Her brother quickly jumped in, saying it made no sense for her to keep a car when she wasn't going to work anymore. "We can help you sell it," he said with a grin, like he was doing her a big favor. "No need for that car to just sit in the driveway. Someone else can use it." Another relative, her cousin this time, looked at her clothes rack in the hallway and said, "She has so many clothes she doesn't wear. We could give them to others who need them more now." It was like they had all been waiting for this moment, to break her down, to divide up her life, her space, her things. They weren't asking, they were planning how to benefit from her so-called loss. Her sister-in-law added with a fake sweet voice, "Since you'll be at home, maybe we can use your room for the kids. It's bigger, and you don't really need all that space now." The room fell silent, but not because anyone felt shame. It was the kind of silence people have when they feel proud of their ideas. But Dineo didn't react. She didn't yell or cry. She just looked around the room slowly, making sure to meet every pair of eyes, one by one. Her father, the man she had respected all her life, leaned back in his chair and gave her a long look. Then he asked a question that shocked her to her core, not because it was cruel, but because it was careless. "So," he said, "do you think you'll go back to your ex now? Maybe he'll take care of you since you're not working." Her heart didn't break. It hardened. He knew what her ex had done to her. He knew the pain she'd gone through to leave him. And yet here he was, suggesting she run back just because she had nothing. Still, Dineo didn't flinch. She didn't give them what they were expecting. Tears, begging, a sign of weakness. Instead, she smiled softly. Not a big smile, but the kind you give when you know a secret no one else knows. The kind of smile that says, "This moment will be remembered." Because what they didn't know was simple. She wasn't jobless. She hadn't been fired. In fact, she had already accepted a job offer at a much bigger company, with a much higher salary. She was about to become the executive director of Africa Affairs at Makumbi Holdings, a 10 million company. But before stepping into that next chapter, she had wanted to see who truly loved her, without the title, without the benefits, without the money. Now she knew. She looked at her mother, who was now talking about how expensive food had become. She looked at her brother, already scrolling through car-selling websites on his phone. She looked at her sister-in-law, who'd already started measuring her room. And she looked at her father, the man who didn't stand up for her, not even once. Not a single person in that room said, "We're here for you." Not one person said, "It's okay, we'll figure this out together." They had all failed the test. Every single one. Dineo nodded slowly, then stood up. "I'll think about everything you've said," she said calmly. "Thanks for the suggestions." And then she walked away. Back to her room, back to her silence. But this time, She didn't feel pain. She felt peace. Because now, everything was clear. She knew who they really were. She had always wondered deep down if they loved her or just what she gave them. Now she had her answer. And soon, very soon, they would see the full picture. But not today. Today she let them think they had won, that they had broken her, that she was lost, because what was coming next would shock them all and change everything. 1 week later, everything looked the same on the outside. Same house, same table, same chairs, same faces. But something was very different. Dineo walked into the dining room calmly, just like she had the week before. This time, she didn't sit with her head low. She didn't look tired or quiet. She sat straight, peaceful, and with a small smile on her face. Her phone was in her hand again, but this time she placed its screen up on the table. She looked around the room at her family, her mother, her father, her brother, her sister-in-law, a few aunts, even a cousin or two. They were all there. Some were chatting, some on their phones, none paying much attention to her. Then her phone rang. It was a video call. Dineo answered and put it on the loudspeaker, with the screen facing up for everyone to see. The cheerful, professional voice of a man filled the room. "Hello, Miss Dineo," the voice said. "I'm so excited to officially welcome you to Makumbi Holdings. The board has approved your appointment and we are proud to have you join us as our new Executive Director of Africa Affairs." The man smiled from the other side of the screen, clearly unaware of what was happening in that quiet living room. Dineo smiled too and responded warmly. "Thank you so much, sir. I'm truly honoured. I'm looking forward to starting this journey with you and the team." At that moment, the entire room changed. Her brother, who had just been bragging about selling her car last week, froze with his mouth open. Her sister-in-law, who had started moving her shoes into Dineo's room, stopped mid-breath. Her mother dropped her cup of tea, and it spilled all over the table. One of her aunts stood up so quickly, her chair fell back. Another aunt, the dramatic one, fainted. Yes, actually fainted. No one said a word. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence, the thick, heavy kind. Her father's eyes were wide. Her cousin whispered, "Executive, what?" Like he couldn't believe what he just heard. They all stared at the screen, watching the call end as the CEO waved and said, "Talk soon." Dineo sat still, her expression calm, her body relaxed, her eyes full of peace. She waited. No one moved. No one spoke. So she stood up slowly and walked out of the room. But then, just as she reached the door, she turned back around. She had one more thing to do. She walked back to the table and pulled out a thick white envelope from her bag. Without saying a word, she dropped it on the table right in the center. Her brother leaned forward to look. Inside the envelope were printed screenshots of every text, every message, every word they had sent her the week before. Every cruel comment, every greedy plan, every heartless joke. The ones they thought she'd forgotten. But she hadn't. She had saved them all. "I was never jobless," she said softly, her voice strong but not angry. "I just needed to see something. I needed to know who saw me as a person and who only saw me as a wallet." You could hear a pin drop. Her mother opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her father looked down at his hands. Her brother leaned back, like he had just realized how small he'd become. The sister-in-law who wanted her room didn't even try to look up. No one had anything to say. Dineo looked around the room one last time. Then she gave a short, polite nod and walked out. No screaming, no revenge, no need. Her silence said more than 1,000 angry words could. She had her answer. Her little test had worked. Later that night, she blocked every single one of their phone numbers. And 3 weeks after that, she bought the house next door. Not because she wanted to be close to them, but to remind herself every day of the lessons she learned. Sometimes, your biggest enemies are sitting at your own table, smiling at you. She didn't need to shout or fight. Her success had spoken for her. And now, the very people who once wanted to divide her life into pieces were left watching her build something bigger than they could ever imagine, right next door. The air in the room was still heavy after the video call. No one had said a word. Everyone was frozen, too shocked to move, too embarrassed to speak. They had just watched the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company offer Dineo a high-level executive position, a position they never believed she could get. Just a week ago, they were discussing how to sell her car and divide her clothes. Now they were staring at a woman they thought had fallen, only to find out she had been flying the whole time. Dineo sat quietly for a moment longer. Her fingers gently tapped the table, slow and calm. Then, with the same quiet grace she'd carried all week, she stood up. Her eyes scanned the room. No one could meet her gaze. Not her mother, not her father, not her brother, not her sister-in-law. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a thick white envelope, clean, crisp, and heavy. Without saying a single word, she dropped it right in the center of the table. The sound of it landing made everyone flinch. They looked at it nervously, confused. Dineo gave a small nod toward it. Her brother was the first to slowly open the envelope. Inside, to their horror, were printed screenshots, dozens of them. Each one captured the harsh texts, voice notes, and messages they had sent her the moment they thought she was jobless. Some were filled with insults. Others were shameless requests. Since you're free now, maybe you can babysit. What are you doing with all that space in your room now? Sell your car. You don't need it. You should have listened when we said your job wasn't real. Will you go back to your ex? Their own words, in black and white, stared back at them. There was no denying them now, no pretending, no lies. They were all there, neatly printed and sorted. It was like watching their masks fall off one by one. Dineo looked around slowly, making eye contact with each of them now, no longer waiting for their approval, no longer hoping for their kindness. She had tested them, and they had failed, completely. Then she spoke, only one short, calm sentence. "I was never jobless," she said. Her voice didn't shake, it didn't rise. It was soft but powerful, steady and unforgettable. "I just wanted to see who saw me as a wallet, and who saw me as family." No one spoke. Her words sliced through the silence like a sharp knife. The shame in the room was so strong it almost had a weight. Her mother blinked fast, like she might cry, but didn't want to admit it. Her father opened his mouth and closed it again. Her brother looked like he wanted to disappear. The sister-in-law simply stared at the floor. The same people who were eager to take everything from her now had nothing to say. Dineo took a deep breath, then turned and began to walk away. But this wasn't a walk of anger. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, clean, powerful. She didn't slam any doors. She didn't throw any insults. She didn't need to. The truth had already done the work for her. The family sat in that silence long after she left the room, some still staring at the papers on the table, some looking down in shame, and some too stunned to even process what had just happened. What they didn't know was that this was not just about a job. It was about respect, about love, about truth. Dineo had given them the chance to show they cared about her, not her paycheck, and they had chosen greed, pride, and selfishness. She hadn't punished them. She had simply revealed them to themselves. Later that night, one of her cousins tried to call her. Blocked. Her brother sent a message. Blocked. Her aunt sent a long apology. Blocked. Dineo didn't need revenge. She had closure. She had finally seen their real faces. Not the ones they wore at family dinners or church gatherings, but their true faces. The ones that only show up when they think you're no longer valuable to them. And now that she had seen them clearly, she was free. No more pretending, no more carrying everyone on her back, no more being the provider just to earn love. She went to bed that night in complete peace. Her new job would begin in a few days, a new chapter, a new city, a new life, and she would walk into it lighter, stronger, wiser. They thought they had tested her strength, but really she had tested their hearts. And they failed. The room was still full of silence, thick with regret, when Dineo took one last look around. Her family sat there frozen, the same people who had turned on her when they thought she had nothing. She had watched them all, quietly, and now she knew everything she needed to know. No screaming, no drama, just truth. Her voice was calm but strong, and her final words cut through the silence like a knife. You lost a sister, a daughter, and a provider. Not because I fell, but because I saw who was waiting to step on me. No one moved. No one said a word, because deep down, they knew she was right. Dineo turned and walked away. Her steps were slow, but full of power. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. She had given them a test, and they had failed, not with small mistakes, but with cruelty and selfishness. That same night, she blocked their numbers, every single one. No more texts, no more fake concern, no more pretending. She was done. And 3 weeks later, while they were still trying to understand what had happened, she did something unexpected. She bought the house right next door to theirs, not to reconnect, not to forgive, but as a quiet reminder, she had risen, and they were no longer part of her journey.